Usually when a professional athlete retires, nobody is particularly surprised. But every once in a while, you get a retirement that doesn't really make much sense at all. And even if it does, sometimes the whole thing is just kind of strange. But at least it gives me something to talk about. So let's dive into the strangest and most unexpected sports retirements of all time. First, we have quarterback Andrew Luck, who shocked the world by announcing his retirement at the age of 29. The Colts drafted Luck in 2012 with the first overall pick, seeing him as the replacement for Peyton Manning. And he pretty much lived up to the expectation, becoming a 3-time Pro Bowler by 2016, when the Colts gave him a 6-year, $140 million extension. Oddly, he was known to congratulate opposing players whenever they would knock him down. Every time he got sacked, he would tell the player something like, "Great job," or "What a hit." This was extremely off-putting to the opposing team, who had no idea how to react. One linebacker was so confused when Luck congratulated him that he reported saying, "Thanks for, accepting that hit?" One time Luck didn't have a chance to congratulate the guy who sacked him, so he found him later in the game to say good job. The linebacker later said, "You want to say thank you, but then you say, 'Wait a second, I'm not supposed to like you.'" But everyone who did like him was shocked when he abruptly announced his retirement in the preseason of 2019. The news was leaked in the middle of a preseason game, causing Colts fans to start booing Andrew Luck as he sat on the sidelines. But perhaps nobody was more upset than O.J. Simpson, who had drafted Luck in fantasy football an hour before the retirement announcement.
Andrew Luck, what did I do to you? You could have retired an hour and a half ago before I picked you in my fantasy picks. I mean, what did I do, Vic?
In a press conference, Andrew Luck said, "I haven't been able to live the life I want to live. It's taken the joy out of this game. The only way forward for me is to remove myself from football." Everyone assumed he was talking about his recent history with injuries. But a few years later, it was revealed that he actually left the game to save his marriage. He said that football was causing him to only see himself as a quarterback and damaging his relationship with his wife. It's just a good thing he realized that after making over $100 million. He's now the GM of Stanford's football program, but only after spending 2 years as an assistant football coach at a California high school, which is a bit like if Beethoven became the tour manager of LMFAO. Next up, we have John Jaso, a professional baseball player who was originally a catcher but shifted to first base and DH. Jaso is probably most remembered as the catcher of Felix Hernandez's perfect game. But beyond that, he was an above-average hitter for most of his career and even hit for the cycle in 2016. Still, the very next year, he abruptly retired shortly after his 34th birthday. When reporters asked him what he was going to do, he said, "I have a sailboat, so I just want to sail away." Which shouldn't have been particularly surprising to anyone who took even a cursory glance at the guy. The only problem was that Jaso barely even knew how to sail. He had only bought the sailboat 3 months prior while having no experience as a sailor. So he found a guy in Florida doing sunset tours on Craigslist and emailed him, offering a few $100 for the guy to teach Jaso how to sail. And he only went through a few hours of training before he decided to hit the open seas alone. But that began a new life for Jaso, who spends at least 6 months of the year on his sailboat to this day. In 2023, the New York Times released a piece on Jaso in which they said that he retired because, quote, "the sea was calling." He revealed that he no longer even follows baseball, but he did go to a Rays game in 2018 and tried to get into the dugout to visit his former teammates. But an employee took one look at him and sent him away, assuming he was a homeless beach hippie. And in a way, he is a homeless beach hippie, just one who happened to make $17 million playing professional baseball. Up next, we have the legendary French footballer Eric Cantona. You might remember this guy from my Julian Assange video, as he was one of the celebrities to visit Assange in his embassy exile. And I got a lot of comments roasting me for pronouncing it Cantona. I think it's clear I do not watch the sport. But out of spite to the people who laughed at me, I'll be calling it soccer from here on out. Anyway, Cantona spent much of his career with Manchester United and was widely considered one of the best players in the game. He was also quite eccentric, well known for the time a fan was yelling at him after a game, and Cantona responded by jumping up and kung fu kicking the fan in the chest, making him an inspiration to every athlete who's ever been heckled. A press conference was held about the incident in which Cantona walked in and said, "When the seagulls follow the trawler, it's because they think sardines will be thrown into the sea. Thank you very much." He then immediately walked out of the room, leaving everyone trying to figure out what the hell he was talking about. But people were perhaps even more confused in 1997, when he abruptly announced his retirement at the age of 30. His plan was to live another life, which turned out to mean that he wanted to become an actor. So over the next few years, he began showing up in the occasional French film, mostly stuff that was not particularly well received. Which begged the question, why the hell did he abandon his soccer career at the height of his success to star in insignificant French films? He later said that he loved soccer but retired because he missed being able to drink and go out with his friends. Meaning he abandoned being one of the greatest players in the most popular sport in the world so he could hit the bar with the fellas. And when you put it that way, I guess it makes sense. Next we have NFL running back Ricky Williams, who actually also appeared in one of my other videos when he took the title of People's Sexiest Athlete from the reluctant sex symbol Elvis Grbac. The Grain of Salt cinematic universe continues to expand. Now, Ricky Williams was an incredible running back, but he had a really weird career. After being drafted 5th overall by the Saints, Williams' rookie contract was negotiated by the rapper Master P, whose company Williams had hired to represent him. The contract ended up being for 7 years and $11.1 million, with incentives that could bring it up to over $68 million. Everyone told him the guaranteed money was way too low, and when he ended up spraining his ankle in his first season, he finished that year making only $125,000. Master P was promptly fired. The whole thing didn't even work out for the Saints either, since they had traded every single one of their picks in the 1999 draft to get Ricky Williams in the first place, which is somehow an even dumber move than hiring a rapper to be your sports agent. But that shows you how good Ricky was expected to be, and he pretty much lived up to it. His only problem was that he really loved smoking weed. He first tested positive for marijuana when he was traded to the Dolphins in 2002, which got him placed on a regular testing program. He failed a second test in December of 2003, which got him a 4-game suspension and a fine of $650,000. But before he could even come back from that suspension, he failed a third drug test, which would have suspended him for the entire season. Instead, he decided to abruptly announce his retirement at the age of 27. And while furious Dolphins fans were removing his name from their jerseys, Ricky moved to California to study the ancient Indian holistic medicine practice Ayurveda. Okay then. But that was far from the end of the Ricky Williams story. The following year, he announced that he would be returning to the NFL and would be completing his 4-game suspension. He ended up playing in 12 games that year to somewhat lackluster results. But going into the next season, he failed a drug test again. This guy was physically incapable of not smoking weed. This time he was suspended for the entire 2006 season. But Ricky still wanted to play football, so he signed a deal with the Toronto Argonauts of the Canadian Football League instead. He instantly became the highest paid running back in the CFL when he signed his contract for $340,000 Canadian dollars. Yeah, people really don't watch that league at all. Former Argonauts quarterback Joe Theismann criticized the organization for signing, quote, an addict, which prompted the owner of the Argonauts to say, "Wait a minute, Joe, didn't your son plead guilty to possessing drug paraphernalia?" I'm paraphrasing there. The actual quote was, "If I was his son and he's calling Williams a drug addict and he should quit and he's a loser, I'd be shattered. This thing is really bothersome." And man, I'm glad Ricky went to Canada just so we could get this incredible beef. After the season was over, the CFL created what is known as the Ricky Williams rule, forbidding suspended NFL players from playing in the CFL. Which is pretty stupid, because it was the only way that anyone was going to watch the CFL. With his suspension over, Ricky returned to the NFL for the 2007 season, only to fail a drug test again. At this point, it feels like he's messing with us and doesn't even want to play. Ricky was suspended for most of the season, during which time he started practicing yoga. He later said that this helped him quit marijuana, and he was ultimately reinstated just in time for a Monday Night Football game in late November. Unfortunately, shortly into the game, a linebacker stepped on Ricky's shoulder, tearing his pectoral muscle and putting him out for the rest of the season. Wow. He ended up playing 4 more seasons and somehow still managed to finish his career with 10,000 rushing yards. And of course, 5 failed drug tests. Next up, I would be remiss if I did this list without talking about Pat Tillman, even though his story is much less whimsical than the last one. Tillman was a safety in the NFL for 4 seasons, from 1998 to 2001. But after 9/11, Tillman felt a calling to serve his country. So he turned down a $3.6 million contract to enlist in the U.S. Army Rangers. He participated in the invasion of Iraq and was then deployed to Afghanistan. But tragically, on April 22, 2004, Tillman was reported to have been killed by an enemy attack after heroically charging up a hill to fight the Taliban. The nation was devastated by this news, especially since Tillman had been a sort of poster child for American enlistment after 9/11. But a month after his death, it was revealed that he had actually been killed by friendly fire, and the whole story totally spiraled from there. You see, shortly before Tillman died, he had been expressing some serious doubt about the war, calling the invasion of Iraq illegal and planning a meeting with author Noam Chomsky, a vocal critic of the war. But before he could go public with his concerns, he was killed by friendly fire in the mountains of Afghanistan. And the more details came out, the worse the whole thing got. It was eventually discovered that there had never even been an enemy attack, and the autopsy on Tillman revealed that he had been shot 3 times in the head at less than 10 meters away, with the doctor determining that, quote, the medical evidence did not match up with the scenario as described. After Tillman died, members of his unit burned his uniform and notebook. One of them later denied that the death was intentional and said that Tillman had no enemies in his unit. Unfortunately, he did have the greatest enemy of all, the US government. Further investigations revealed that military officials had conspired to hide the details of Tillman's death from the public and even from Tillman's parents. He had also died 6 days before the Abu Ghraib torture scandal came to light, so this was a terrible PR week for the Bush administration. A coalition of veterans publicly asked NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to help secure the release of all documents relating to Tillman's death. And anyone who's watched the NFL can tell you that Goodell was not going to do a thing about that. It's actually more likely that he caused the death by praying for it in a dark magic ritual. Anyway, no criminal charges were filed against anyone involved in the incident, and the wars continued for many years. Not much more I can say about that without this channel becoming a totally different thing, so let's just move on. Finally, let's talk about what is probably the most iconic early sports retirement of all time. I'm talking, of course, about Michael Jordan abruptly leaving the NBA to become a professional baseball player. After winning the NBA Finals 3 years in a row, Jordan announced in 1993 that he had lost his desire to play basketball and would be retiring immediately at the age of 30. This shocked the basketball world, and Jordan later clarified that he was influenced by the recent death of his father, James. After allegedly pulling over on the side of the road because he was tired, James Jordan had been shot to death by 2 teenagers who then stole his car, as well as 2 championship rings that Michael had given his dad. The death obviously affected Michael Jordan, but it did more than convince him to quit basketball. James Jordan had always dreamed that Michael would become an MLB player. It kind of feels a little picky for your son to become the best player in the NBA, only for you to complain that it's not the sport you wanted, but I digress. So, 4 months after his retirement from basketball, Michael Jordan surprised everyone again by signing a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox. And the thing about baseball is, you can't exactly just jump into it. So over the course of his season with the White Sox's Double-A affiliate, Jordan batted .202 with 3 home runs and a .555 OPS, which is not great, especially considering he was mostly playing against a bunch of kids. Although to Jordan's credit, his stats improved over the course of the season, and he did steal an impressive 30 bases. The team's manager was the now legendary Terry Francona, who later said about Jordan, "After I met him, I quickly realized how much he respected what we were doing. With 1,500 at-bats, he would have found a way to get to the major leagues." But Terry is also a famously nice guy, so maybe he was just being polite. Overall, I think it's safe to say that Michael Jordan did a better job playing baseball than you and I would have, but not as good as an actual MLB player. Before he could get more practice, Jordan reversed his decision the following year, returning to the Chicago Bulls in the middle of the season. The 3 years after that saw him win another 3 championships. Probably a good idea to come back. Still, the retirement never really made any sense. Over the years, we've seen the emergence of a conspiracy theory that Michael Jordan was actually embroiled in a massive gambling scandal. The idea is that Jordan, who was already known for his love of gambling, was given a quiet 1-year suspension by the NBA, which they covered up by having him retire for a year. The Bulls and the White Sox are both owned by Jerry Reinsdorf, who strangely opted to keep honoring Jordan's basketball contract even while he was playing baseball. Throw in the weirdness of James Jordan's murder, and you have the recipe for a pretty solid conspiracy theory. Maybe not Pat Tillman level, but we're getting somewhere. So those are some of the strangest sports retirements of all time. I'm sure I forgot a few good ones, so let me know in the comments who's missing. And remember that if your job ever gets too overwhelming, you can always take a year off to play professional baseball or study Ayurveda. Now please consider subscribing, or I'll have Master P negotiate your next raise.